We're trying to make sense of this very unique feeling as we're approaching this Holocaust Memorial Day. Maybe I'm projecting, but I don't think I'm alone in this. I really don't think there's ever been a Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, like this one. And the reason that I say that, and I can only speak for myself when I say this, although I'm sure there's a lot of others that feel this way too, is because as we memorialize the Nazi Holocaust from 80 years ago, 80 plus years ago, it's never felt like we were as close to the potential of another one happening as we are right now. So there's that Holocaust energy in the air, and we're memorializing that one. But should we really memorialize it from a place where it feels like there's that energy? We may be on the brink of one. And so, when we repeat the familiar refrain of never again, right, after seeing the mini Holocaust that we're still reeling from October 7th, that the world seems to have forgotten, after seeing the vicious, virulent Jew hatred bubbling over in America and around the entire world in ways that we haven't seen since the early 40s in Germany, the question we're being forced to ask ourselves is whether we can really say never again, right, with the same conviction that we've always said it with. Now, I want to clarify that, that right now, I am not saying that the Holocaust will happen again. I'm not saying it will happen again, because it's on this point that I've seen a lot of people get derailed from the greater and deeper issue here. The Holocaust will obviously not happen again. There will definitively not be Nazis taking over the government and putting Jews in gas chambers and ovens. Why? Because that's how it happened last time. And it never happens the same way twice. America is a very different country than pre-Holocaust Germany in so many different fundamental ways. And while we see similar genocidal hatred rearing its ugly hatred, its ugly head in America today, as we saw in Germany back then, America as a country is just different. America was founded on biblical principles. America is a nation of tens of millions of God-fearing people, of Jew-loving people, a nation that all the polls show still very much has a heart for Israel. It's almost as if the nation is divided in half. But I would go so far as to say in pre-Holocaust Germany was not divided in half. That nation was raised on the milk from their mothers of seething hatred of Jews. That was just ready to come to the surface. So of course it won't happen in the same way. It couldn't. But what could happen? Well, a lot of things could happen. But one thing that we know is that it won't be exactly the same as it is in the past. It never is. Douglas Murray, have you heard of Douglas Murray? He's really distinguished himself as being one of the most articulate defenders of Israel alive today. And he actually said it like this.
One of the simple problems about anti-Semitism is, as everybody who knows about it knows, is that it's a shape-shifting virus. At one point in the history of Europe, in the history of our own country, the Jews were hated because they were poor, and then they were hated because they were rich. They were hated for not integrating, and then they were hated for integrating. In the era where you could hate people for their religion, they were hated for their religion. Then when that became impossible in Europe, you couldn't hate people for their religion, they were hated for their race. Then at a particular point in Europe, we discovered we couldn't hate people for their race anymore. So what did we hate people for if they were Jewish? We hated them for being stateless. Then the Jewish people got a state, and they were hated for having a state. Now, you cannot tell me in this situation that there's a coincidence here. It is not a coincidence that every way you do it, it ends up like that. The thing about it is that it tells you about the person who suffers from it, not about the Jews. He says, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of. People who hate the Jews for being religious have religious problems themselves. People who hate the fact that Jews have a state that they're willing to defend have a problem with defending their own state themselves, and much, much more on and on and on.
I mean, how perfect was that? That is just so true. And the explication of all of the different veneers and facades that the Jew hatred takes is a little bit longer than that, but the point is made. I mean, look, immediately after experiencing the most vicious, brutal, genocidal attack since the Holocaust, we're accused by the very perpetrators of that genocide of what? Of genocide. What they're guilty of. That's what they're blaming us for, exactly as Douglas Murray just said. But at the same time, every Jew who is brave enough to be brutally honest with themselves, even for that fleeting moment when the defenses may not be up, every Jew knows that something is happening. It's like in our epigenetic DNA. You know, our collective memory is being triggered. Our collective consciousness is being activated. What we're seeing boiling up is not something new at all. It's something very ancient and very familiar. It just has a kafia on it at this time instead of a swastika, but the hatred is the same.